There we go. I'm now going to hand over to our keynote speaker, Dr. Erica McAlister.
Okay. Hi everyone, can you just confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Good, excellent. So yes, hello everyone. Welcome to my shed in my garden. When I'm not working at the museum in London or traveling around trying to identify insects, I'm stuck in my little shed with thousands of insects in front of me. And I've had an obsession for the smaller majority for a very long time. But I realize that I am often fighting very hard against a public perception of what we consider valuable on this planet and different creatures that we need to conserve, with some given higher priorities over the others. So there's often, for example, a problem with perception. So everyone gets, oh, cute mammals, aren't they wonderful? Look at this little marmoset. I came across this at the base of Sugarloaf when I was in Brazil. And it's like, how can I persuade actually somebody to look after this fly rather than these little marmosets? I mean, this fly, I would agree, well, I would say is rather nice. And this is the Batman hoverfly. You can see it's got a little bat on its back. You see where it gives its name. But a lot of species, a lot of insects don't endear themselves in the same way to the general public. There's a lot of problems when it comes to size. I mean, this is one of the smallest animals on the planet. This is a tiny parasitic wasp. We've got here is a female one because the males are wingless. And in fact, if you have a look, this is from the collection. I went to take a photo of these in the collection. And I'm not actually sure whether I'm being lied to by the curators who look after them because I couldn't see anything of it. So once more, how do I get the public to say, do you know what, these are as important as a whale or an elephant when it comes to conserving them? And they're just not valued. It is a question I got asked day in, day out. What's the point of mosquitoes? What's the point of wasps? What's the point of this? And I tire slightly of saying, but what's the point of you? Because really, that's something we shouldn't be saying anything. We shouldn't be always arguing what is the point of something. Isn't there just a reason for all of these species to exist and for us to exist alongside them? Most people, they would consider insects as just pests. The plethora of goods that you can buy nowadays to kill insects is quite extraordinary. There's been loads of things. You just go on Twitter and you can look at, you know, of all these images of shelves upon shelves of ways to destroy and maim and kill all the insects in our garden, often referred to as pests. But truly, what does the word pest mean? Is this not a species maybe we would consider in the wrong place? Arguably, we took over their gardens, so aren't we the pest? And so in this talk, I just want to give you a little heads up to what I think is important, why I think insects are the most amazing animals, and why we really should try and think about how to look after a planet with them very much the focus of our attention. Because also insects are rather adorable, and that's the whole thing. I'm rather selfish. I want humans to survive. I want humans to live in a beautiful environment. And that beautiful environment very much does need the insects, but also gives me something to make me feel good about going out there. So first off, why? So insects, there's a lot of them. There's millions of them. At the moment, we've described about 1.1 to 1.2 million species on this planet, but rough estimates is there's probably about 10 million of them. And this is what you're looking at. This is called a speciescape. And here we have different species, number of species in proportion to their size. I like this one because I'm a fly specialist, and obviously the fly is the biggest creature. And they dominate the planet, not just in numbers of species, but abundance. There are quintillions of them alive at any one moment. You look for the little mammal, look, there it is, little deer, elk, sitting next to the giant fungi. And interestingly, just for flies alone in the UK, there are more species of fly in the UK than there are mammals on the planet. So when it comes to them doing things, getting everywhere, being part of our ecosystem, insects are incredibly important. Just picking out some of the hoverflies. These are some of the cuties. We've got about 280 species of hoverfly in the UK. And not only are they really important for their ecosystem services, they're stunning to look at. And what I really like about the hoverflies is that you've got all sorts of interesting interactions that they get up to based on their morphology, their behavior, and their life cycle. For most of the insects, about 80% of the insects, they go through what we call a complete metamorphosis. So the egg, before it gets to the adult, goes through these two different stages, the larval stage, the feasting stage, and then it goes through the pupal stage, where it completely reorganizes its body tissues. Like the idea of getting to your teenage years and going, right, that's it, changing shape now. So before that, you were a legless, amorphous sac, just concentrated on feeding, again, quite similar to teenagers. And then you develop into this incredibly mobile, often flighted individual that is able to migrate and travel and disperse to many different habitats. And in doing so, they've managed to exploit so many different ecological niches. So they are predators, they're parasites, they're parasitoids, they eat the insides out of things, it's great. They're herbivores, they're the true vegetarians, they're sanguivores, they're the blood feeders. Fungivores, they like a mushroom. Decomposers, and arguably quite important now for us, the pollinators. So many of our crops, so many of our flowering plants are essentially only pollinated by insects. We have some exciting examples pollinated by bats. Thank you, bats, for giving us tequila. But most of our supermarket shelves are dominated by those pollinated by insects. So the major taxa that are involved in this pollination, we have all heard of the bees doing it, including the bumblebees, but also the ants, the flies, the beetles, thrips, butterflies, and moths. There's a load that we are beginning to understand that are very important in pollinating. Interestingly, a lot of the focus seems to be on honeybees. And to an entomologist, this slightly irks us because a honeybee is basically a farmyard animal. It's farmed. It's not necessarily important in the ecosystem that we're taking it into. What we have to learn more is about our local pollinators. It's like a fast, what is it? That show, the awful one, where it's local pollinators for local plants. So we have to get in there and get them. And they're really important. So we think about our strawberries, we think our mangoes, we think about tea that is pollinated. We think about all these different things that we love. But most importantly, one would say, what about chocolate? Now, I hate chocolate. I think it's disgusting. I know that's a tad unusual, but what is more unusual is actually what pollinates chocolate. So if you were to go up to Scotland, or if you were to travel anywhere where you have an abundance of midges and everyone moans so much about these nuisance flies, these pests, these no-see-ums getting in there, well, actually their cousins are the ones that pollinate chocolate, because the chocolate is not the most efficient of reproducers. Some have estimated that between 400 to 500 cocoa flowers will produce fruit, and only 10 to 30% of those pods will actually reach maturity. So there's really very little going on. It's like the panda of the plant world. And what happens with cocoa is it likes to be an understory plant. Now, as an understory plant, it's got the story above it, the trees above it, which offer shelter for the tiny little midges. And these midges, the only time they like having adult time, as we call it, is in this tall understory. And their larvae, once they've reproduced, their larvae lives in the detritus layer, this leaf litter layer that's underneath the cocoa plants. Now, our ignorance of these pollinators, and where they live and how they reproduce is actually causing a massive decline in cocoa. because we're taking them out of these little agro ecosystems and we're putting them in massive monocultures, much the same way we're doing with so much of our agro ecosystems at the moment. Our landscapes are dominated by these huge fields, and not enough pollinators are enabled to get in and survive in these systems. There's lots of talk about it nowadays. We're beginning to truly understand the impact of ourselves, of humans, on insects, and especially the pollinator species. This is a map, this is a graph that came out recently. It's actually a government document, and it's looking at the indicator species, indicate the change of pollinator distribution. So it's based on 377 species of insects, of which 148 species of bee and 229 species of hoverfly. And basically, it doesn't look good. We are seeing a massive decline, and this is something we need to halt. In all of our impact on ecosystems, we have to halt this. We have to reverse this change, because it's not just the pollination services that are really important. For example, biological control. I love this. So in your garden, I describe it as a 1980s nightclub, right? Everything is going on. There's all sorts of inappropriate behavior, but there's lots of fighting and eating and all sorts of things going on. But one of the things we've got is insects actually regulating the environment they're in. So this biological control, these are ladybirds. There's a ladybird adult and a ladybird larvae, and these are vicious predators. Again, we're quite taxed on TV. When the BBC did a documentary now about predators, I'm sitting there on the sofa screaming about the smaller predators that were equally vicious and arguably more important. Because these ladybirds and their larvae, their offspring, consume aphids, and aphids are huge economical pests. Thanks to us getting rid of a lot of the good biological control species, these aphids are going out of control. So we need them. We need our larvae of our ladybirds and the adults to go in there. But also, there's some more interesting ones. I'm a fly person, so of course I'm going to say this. So next time in your garden and you see what looks like a piece of feces, like wiggling around your garden, just take a moment and have a look. Because this is the larvae of these hoverflies. This is a species here called the marmalade hoverfly. Now, hoverflies, I've already talked about, are incredibly good pollinators as adults, but a lot of them, as their larvae, they do other things as well. It's this alternation of generations that I talked about. And these, their larvae, again, eat aphids. I love this because the story of how these eat aphids release a distress pheromone. So when they're being attacked, all the sisters start screaming out to each other, going, run, run, we're being attacked and whatever. But this little hoverfly larvae, when it eats an aphid, it lifts it right into the air. And so the distress pheromone wafts over the heads of all the others. These are such good predators. Now, this hoverfly not only is a really good pollinator and a really good larvae that are really good predators, it migrates into this country all across Europe. So in doing so, it spreads pollen, it spreads nitrogen. It is basically the greenest animal on the planet. It is a recycler, it's a biological control agent, and it's a pollinator. It's fabulous. And in fact, flies throw up some unique opportunities in dispelling lots of weird and often unfair perceptions. For example, mosquitoes. Everybody hates mosquitoes, but they're really important pollinators. Okay, in fact, in the Arctic system, where there's 4,000 species of insects, 2,000 of them are flies. And these little mosquitoes are able to survive in really bad conditions. So a lot of their larvae will have antifreeze in them, and they will be able to survive. So the adults will pollinate, and some of them are very important for orchids and other species like that. But the larvae are happily living in these really cold environments. Now that has a knock-on effect, because that is really good for bird populations. So we have to think about all of these animals existing in one massive ecosystem, one unit. And if you impact on one, you greatly impact on everything else. And due to the sheer numbers of the larvae, They are so important for the migrating birds coming across. They aren't the only ones that feast on insects. We do ourselves. Most people have a love of honey, again, like chocolate. I'm not a honey fan, but honey is great, and we've been using it. We're beginning to really, truly understand also not just its edible nature, but its medicinal nature. But let me talk about the maggots on the side of this. Now, this maggot, it's another fly maggot, I argue is going to save the problems of the planet, because this is the black soldier fly, and its larvae are the original hipsters. They love nothing better than recycling. And what they do is they consume organic waste. So imagine your compost in your kitchen, you feed it to these larvae, they consume it. And in doing so, they increase their body mass by about 200 to 300 times. And what they're doing is they're converting it to protein, which is about 40% of their body mass, and fat, which is 30%. This is nutrient rich. This is one of the most efficient energy converters out. And also, they do not consume water. So when we're thinking about feeding the planet, when we're thinking about going into environments where we can't sustain, like large herbivores, or where there's water problems, or even socio-economic problems of actually looking after these large animals, these little maggots are brilliant. A lot of people don't like the idea of eating the maggot, but I've eaten it as flour. I've eaten it as pasta. And so it's really good. It's a really cheap, energy efficient and environmentally friendly way of getting rid of your waste and converting it into something brilliant. And also in getting rid of your waste, they get rid of a lot of the species that maybe are seen more as pest species, those that transfer bacterium, etc. And so they're really good at outcompeting those and getting in and making sure that your leftover onion or your decomposing cabbage becomes something worthwhile again. There's other ways that we utilize insects and have done for a long time. We use them as dyes. So this is the cochineal. It's a scale bug, okay? And this has been used for thousands of years. It's collected and it's crushed, and people have used it for lipstick, nail polish, food dyes, and clothes dyes, etc. You can scrape it off cacti, so you can see where it came from. We've also got lag. This is another type of bug, another type of scale insect, and this makes shellac and things like that. So we've been polishing furniture with it for ages. Beeswax, bees pollen, the propolis, these two products again. It's not just the honey that we're liking the bees for, it's these other subsidiary products as well, which is really useful. So we have been alongside utilizing insects for a long time for our own benefit. And so we must start thinking properly about how to look after them. Now, we don't have to just look after them. They can also look after us, because some of them are medics. And this is great. So these are the ant lions, army ants. And these are great. These are, you've got the workers and you've got the soldiers. And the soldiers have a formidable jaws. And look at them, they're brilliant. Now, what they've been doing is that they've realized that they can use these jaws as sutures. So if you put the ant near you, if you've got an open wound, if you put it there, it will close on your wound and seal it shut. How cool is that? You're in the jungle, you're bleeding, just find some ants, and that's it, you're looked after. That is a direct way that they've used in medicine. But we've also been bio-inspired into looking at them in a different fashion. I'm very, very interested in bio-inspired technology. You know, insects have been around for millennia, for millions and millions of years. They've been evolving and adapting to their environment. And it's about time we paid more attention to how they got there. We've only really started in the last 300 years properly looking at developing industry and technology and things like that. And arguably, we've made a few massive mistakes along the way. So why not pay attention to these little creatures? For example, this is what we call a punk fly. I love it. It's a family called Tachinids, and it's very bristly, hence the name punk flies. This is the least bristly one, which is a bit annoying. But this one is quite amazing because the mothers, they need to find a host for their offspring. And everyone knows how clever and ingenious mothers get when it comes to making sure they give the best start to their offspring. Now, she's only 3 millimeters long, and she's looking for little bugs in which to lay her larvae in. Now, she's got, a lot of the insects, they hear with their antennae, but unlike you and I, which have got ears either side of often this vacuous space as I have, they can't triangulate in the same way. So it's hard for them to directionalize, to figure out where the host is. So on this fly, if you go from the head to the thorax, this middle part, you'll see the big black bit there. And if you go between the eye and the big black hole, there looks like a segment of orange. Now that is an amazing part of it, because in those shoulder pads, it's actually developed a hearing aid. What it is it's a tiny rocking horse, and this is able to actually amplify the noise dramatically. And in doing so, she's able to triangulate where the host is. Now, once we realized this, once we stumbled across this amazing mechanism, this minute mechanism, we were inspired to think about how we could use it for our own advantage. And in fact, about 10 years ago, or slightly more than that, they've developed tiny, tiny microphones to be able to put in hearing aids. So we can now have the smallest of hearing aids, which are able to have directional hearing based on these flies, which is fabulous. Another way that flies are quite good is maggots. Who doesn't like a maggot? I love a maggot. I am quite obsessed by maggots. I mean, we all should. They're fantastic creatures. They look like little sleeping bags full of vegetable soup, is my description. And the maggot stage is only in fact associated, we call the larvae of most of the diptera, and the maggots are within one group of them, the higher flies. Now, interestingly, we've been using maggots a lot for all sorts of things, but people like Genghis Khan and his marauding armies, the hill people of Papua, the Mayans, were the first ones to really stumble across them using for debridement therapy. So during the American Civil War, this is when they probably started paying attention to the fact that soldiers who'd got maggots in their wounds weren't dying. They weren't turning into this gangrenous individuals with having their flesh consumed, because in fact, the maggots were getting rid of the rotten flesh. Great. And not only were they getting rid of the rotten flesh, they were releasing an enzyme which got rid of the bacteria. And nowadays, we know this is effective against MRSA, but it also released enzymes that cause the skin to bind better. So people are coming away. And this is really important. You can now get debridement therapy on the NHS. This is excellent for people with type 2 diabetes that often have large open sores and wounds, which actually aren't cured by any other way apart from these majestic medics. Not only are insects medics, but they're all detectives as well. And for a very long time, for about 2,000 years, we've understood although only really properly recently, about succession on a dead body, about what insects turn up where. And this wonderful larvae, obviously only his mother would love him. These are part of the blowflies and bluebottles, the calaphorids, and these are the first to turn up at the scene. And they're amazing. They can sniff a dead body from a long, long way away and are able to turn up within 15 minutes of a nefarious deed. And this helps us to understand when a crime has occurred and things like that. But we can also tell you something more about how things happened, because they're now looking at how when they consume the flesh, they're looking at all sorts of narcotics within the animals as well. They can tell you all sorts. We're now using modern technology like micro CT scanning to be able to look at the pupal stage, this hidden stage. And in this hidden stage, we're able to see the development of the larvae into adult. Usually it's about 2 weeks and it's hidden, but now we can see in real time what's going on. So the police have hour-to-hour accuracy going on. So we have to thank these little detectives. Now, insects don't just hang around dead bodies, they also hang around our feces. And thankfully, not just our feces. Now, this may seem quite disgusting, and it's one of the things people don't like about insects. Ugh, why do they have to hang around poo? Actually, just take a second to think about this. You really do need them to hang around poo, because the amount of poo that's defecated on our planet every day is extraordinary. I believe elephants is something like 30 kilograms a day. Think about how many elephants, think about how many humans, we're only about 1 to 2 kilograms a day, but I still think that would all add up. So we really do need these insects to get in there, to remove our poo, and to actually get it recycled back into the environment. And this is, again, really important. We have to think about all these different ecological processes that the insects are so heavily involved in. But we also have to think about insects that think about ourselves. The original lab animal is a Drosophila melanogaster. This is a fly that most of us, if we've done any sort of biomedical training at university, etc., we would have been told a lot about. This is an amazing animal, and it's helped us understand inherited diseases. It's helped us understand gene expression. It's helped us understand behavior. We get flies drunk because it's unethical to get humans drunk. Don't know where the students were then. And also, we've been using it to understand how we cope in different environments. For example, the first animals into space was, in fact, a fly. In 1947, it was the first one to go up, and it has been going up ever since. Amusingly, it was also one of the first group of animals to circumnavigate the moon, along with 2 tortoises. Genuinely would love to know what on earth a tortoise fought being flown around the moon, but they all came back safely. And we are beginning to look at space travel, rightly or wrongly. We're trying to explore these different environments, and this can have some really good impact on how we utilize things on Earth, which I think is a good reason for this. And one of them we are looking at is taking insects into space, is how far they can travel and how they sleep. But also, we're making models, we're making robots out of insects to enable them to explore for us. Robo-bugs is great. Again, this is bio-inspired technology because we can think about how animals move, how these insects move, how they get into different environments, how they fly, how they jump. And this is great for exploring habitats which were maybe quite nasty or dangerous to us. So developing all of these. There is a lot of talk about using robots as pollinators, but insects have learned to do that a lot better than we have, and therefore we shouldn't go around saying it's okay, we can replace them with bugs. For example, this is an insect that has inspired us to think of something quite different. I love this. I love the fact that this beetle doing headstands in a desert has inspired us to develop technology to collect water from fog. So this is the a headstanding beetle. It's found in Namibia, and it is great. And Namibia, if you've ever been, it is very, very dry. But every month or so, these amazing fog bodies will roll across it. It's a beautiful sight. And these beetles come up from these sand dunes, and they get on the top of the sand, and they do a little headstand. They put their bum in the air like they just don't care. And in doing so, across the back of their body and down all along it, they have these rivets. And the water, the fog, condenses on the back of the beetles, and it travels through these streams to the mouth where it's filtered in. And so the beetle is able to get water out of thin air. Now, we're using this to develop things like self-fulfilling water bottles, but we're also developing sheets, big bits of material, and they've been trying this out in the Atacama Desert, which is the driest place on the planet. and they're able to get water from the air. So this is amazing. It's enabling us to exist and to cope in some very quite harsh environments. I don't just like them for what they can do for us. I like how they themselves have managed to get themselves into some of the most extreme environments possible. I spent quite a lot of my early years caving. I love caving. And it turns out I'm not the only one. I am very lucky. I've been hoovering in a cave looking for flies. But some colleagues of mine actually caved quite a considerable distance down. This is the tallest building in the world, just to give you some sort of perspective of size. And look, if I invert the tallest building in the world, turn it upside down, you can see how far down this cave is. So 1,500 meters. And it was at 1,000 meters, they found this fly. Now, this is a truly troglodyte animal, i.e. it lives in a cave the whole time. And what is amazing is it's the largest flying true troglodyte out. It is a non-biting midge, a chironomid. Bats, they fly, yep, but they leave the caves and come back in. So it's not like they spend their whole time there. And what also is fascinating about it is it's totally blind. It's really, really hairy. And we think that it uses its hairs as sensors to enable it to look around, to feel its habitat, the same that cats' whiskers and all of this do. And actually, we are thinking about how we can develop self-righting suits based on these whisker principles of that when we are detecting motion, we're able to right ourselves again. I love it as well, is that we've only ever found females. Now, we don't know if she's parthenogenic, i.e. that she can reproduce without needing a male, much in the same way certain species like aphids don't need this, and thrips, or if the males, we just haven't found them. Maybe they're not winged, maybe they're just tiny, but we haven't had a clue. I need to get in there and go and find them. Also in caves, you get some amazing bioluminescent creatures. So this, one of the things that why insects are so important is also for tourism. And I know a lot of people are like, hold on, who goes to see insects for tourism? Well, these are the glowworm caves of New Zealand. My mum has been there. Stats I can prove to you it's a tourist attraction. And what it is amazing. These are the larvae of these caryoplattids, which are a type of fungus gnat. These larvae are highly predaceous. They're amazing. They would eat each other if they got too close. But they have developed a new bioluminescent enzyme that is very different to the rest of the other, like the ones found in beetles, like this disco beetle here. And what they would do is that they have developed a fiber optic network through their body. They develop this bioluminescence in what is their kidneys, their malpighian tubules, and they would glow. And from their mouths and the rest of their body, they release this silk strand, and on it are balls of death. These enzymes that will pierce anything that attaches to them, and which has been attracted to the light. So these poor little moths will be like circling around going, oh, look at the light, look at the light. And then they will get liced open and then pulled up fishermen that these little species are. These, the beetles below, I came across these when I was in Dominica, and it's great. I used to call them disco beetles because they fly around at night, luminescent, and they would be calling with these beautiful little bioluminescent spots. And it's all fun and you know, it's lovely. There's loads of species. We get glowworms in the UK with that. We understand lots about them. And we have used this bioluminescence ourselves for all sorts of products, including staining some of our genes to understand what is going on. Everything when we look at, we can think about, oh, do you know what? That's amazing. And these are the sites in North America, some of the most beautiful like visions of all of these insects come out at once when they have these massive mating swarms with the males going crazy to advertise to the females. And this is what we must remember about. I've just spent a long time telling you about the value and the importance and the ecological interactions of these insects. But also there is the intrinsic value of these species. These species are amazing to look at, and we forget this at times. We forget as scientists to tell you that we really love them. This is a lovely picture of the gal. She's Holly, and it was on the BBC website. And in her bedroom, she has about 50 spiders and other things associated with that. She thinks they're amazing. She loves them. And she's not the only one. Many of us really do enjoy looking at them. In fact, we even take tarantulas into old folks' home to let them care and look after. Hearing cicadas and things like this, we used to keep them to be able to rock ourselves to sleep with this gentle rhythm. We very much are part of this world, and we need to remember that. So, this is me again holding this big beetle. One of the reasons I love insects, one of the reasons I'm inspired by insects, one of the reasons I think insects are important is because they are truly quite amazingly different and diverse. So this is a dung beetle. This is a scarab found in Costa Rica. It's one of the heaviest insects out. Oh, it was heavy. And just look at the variety of form with this beetle and think about your ladybird in your garden, how much variety goes on. This is a cricket I came across. I mean, it's purple. Come on, really. It's a purple animal. How often do you get to see that? This is really quite amazing. It's got orange antennae and it's purple. This is again the color. But we need to really start looking at them and start quickly acting to help our environment, to help our country, to help our planet, to look after them. Because there's still so much we need to learn about them. This is a dotted bee fly. I love bee flies. Look at them. They're so hirsute. They're hairy, they're fluffy. And I love the fact that this bee fly just sat down beside me and just plonked itself on its bottom. It was almost like it took time out with me and said, okay, we're both on this planet and we need to figure out to do what next. So this week is celebrating the anniversary of The Silent Spring, Rachel Carson's book, which was first published in 1962. That was my cat, sorry. Now, I read this back in the 80s the first time and I cried. I then read it again and cried. And recently I reread this edition and cried. It is amazing to me how much we have changed and adapted and learned and moved on, but also in the same breath, how much we have failed to move on and understand our environment better. We are facing now an even greater challenge when it comes to pesticides, climate change, land use change, and all of that. And we need to understand how those factors are impacting on the largest majority, that silent majority of species on the planet. So I'm asking everyone to please take a little bit more time, take a little bit more care, and go out and look at the insects because they all need you to help them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. I want to give a little round of applause, but I feel like it'd be just me and it'd be a bit awkward. But that was absolutely incredible. Thank you. There's so much information in there. It's so fascinating. And it's so nice to hear someone talking about insects in such a positive and passionate way, because it's so opposite to how we normally hear them talked about. And actually, I'm going to jump ahead of the other questions. Sorry, everybody, because it kind of follows on from what I've just said, because I saw you put out a tweet last week or maybe the week before about how you wish you could have more conversations with people where you say about your research and people say, oh, that's really cool, rather than, oh, I hate flies. And obviously it's quite upsetting. And I can imagine, as a researcher, that must be quite demoralizing at times. But how do you think we can go away from something like this and try and change people's opinions of insects?
Just keep talking about them. I even after that tweet, I did a radio interview when we were talking about the insect apocalypse. And he was like, oh, we need to save the bees. We need to save the bees. And I was like, that's great. We finally got through to everyone that the bees are important. We're moving on from honeybees, thankfully, and solitary bees and everything else. But he said, why flies? And I said, well, because of all of this. They're so important, pollinators, whatever. And then afterwards, he signed off and he went, well, she said they're adorable and cute. Oh, I don't believe her. Just hand me the SWAT. It's just like, oh my God, did he really just say that? But we then raged against that radio station, and they had me back on the next day for about 4 times the time. So I think raging works. Oh, sorry, my cat is just raging is important. And I also just want people to spend more time for your own mental health as well. Just go and sit in the garden, go and sit in a bit of space. We have wild animals roaming around. Next time a fly is in your living room, don't just go, ugh. Just take time out and look at it. This evolved millions of years ago. And look at it. I can barely get off the sofa, you know, and yet this is flying upside down around my house.
Amazing, amazing. If anybody else has any questions, please put them in the chat. And I can see one from Octavia, and I thought she'd ask a question. So this is a friend of mine, and she's just started a PhD as an Antarctic entomologist. So she was very excited about this talk. And she would like to know about forensic entomology. Does the order of insects that arrive at a decomposing body change depending on the seasons? And do you think that climate change will affect this in the future?
Yep. Yes. So they've been doing long-term studies based on insect succession, based on temperature and climate. So we know that it speeds up certain things, it will slow down certain things, and different species will come in. So when we are very observant about what species are in our country and what ones are able to come in, and so different forensic species will be important depending on where you are on the planet. So all of that will have a massive impact. Are they doing entomology in Antarctic?
Yes, Antarctic entomology, and I would love to be able to tell you which species of insect, and she has told me, but
well, it's quite interesting because climate change, obviously it's having a real negative effect there. And what the species that are turning up, say in South Georgia, the islands there, are pollinators, and we don't want them turning up there because these are like the hoverflies. And in doing so, they're adding too much nitrogen to the soil. And so this is having a really adverse situation. Oh my God, she's working on the chironomid. Okay, so, she's working on the largest purely terrestrial animal in Antarctica, which is a chironomid. It's a midge at a whopping 3 millimeters. So it's a really funky animal to be working on. Lucky person.
Yes, no, she's very excited about it. Going to be very cool.
So she's doing that as well.
Yes,
that would be a very interesting PhD.
Does anybody else have any questions? While you're doing that, I wanted to ask you, Erica, you've obviously done a lot of your own research, been involved in lots of different studies, but is there any research or any findings that you could pinpoint as potentially your favorite or most interesting?
The stuff coming out of Exeter at the moment, which is looking at migratory hoverflies. I just think that's stunning. So it is just, they're looking at the abundance of it. So there's 4 billion hoverflies turning up each spring, right? So these are the ones that we're talking about, like the marmalade hoverfly. And they are looking now from different parts. So some of them are coming from North Africa. They're migrating to the UK from North Africa.
Wow.
And we don't think about hoverflies being migrants, but they're coming over here. They're mixing with the locals, which is very good for gene flow. They're consuming huge amounts of aphids. They're bucking the trend when it comes to species loss and density loss. And they're again, it's the gene flow. It's these relic populations of plants that they're doing. And all of that work I find is amazing. It's really how we could have ignored these species for so long, and when they're so important.
So how long would it take them to do that migration?
Not long. It's not like they do. It's not like the monarchs who have to do three generations, whatever. Nope, off they go up in the aerial plankton and get across. And then the females will return in one journey. She will lay her offspring and she dies, and then the offspring come back. So again, what is going on there? This is throwing up all sorts of really quite interesting and maybe slight philosophical questions.
So is it just part of the population that migrates, or is it the whole population? Sorry, everyone, I'm kind of hogging this. This is really interesting.
Well, There, well, I'm not sure how much stays behind there, but we have a resident UK population as well. So we have a resident one that might overwinters here. So there's these two populations. And one thing I would love, if someone gave me a load of money, I'd like to look at the genetics in our collection. So we can now start doing historic DNA recovery and whole genome recovery, which is great, because we can start asking much more in-depth questions about where these species come from, what they ate, what was going on, when insecticide resistance came in, all these sorts of things. So, and also we can look at the pollen in their guts. So again, these micro CT scanners, we can start scanning that. Honestly, just give me quite a few million. I'll settle with $1 million. That'd be great. I know. But there's so much money. Thanks, please do that. But there's so much now. Technology is there. We can use it. We have these things, collections that go back hundreds of years. You know, that they're so important. They offer so much information.
So Andy says a question that's quite relevant now, with the UK government racing to deregulate and potentially scrap habitat and freshwater regulations, what can the general public and other organisations ask their government representatives to do to protect our incredible insect worlds? I thought this would come up this evening.
They can ask them to protect it. They can actually ask the legislation to be upheld. Now, as a Natural History Museum person, I am not allowed to have a political opinion. So I will do this as apolitically as possible, but please do ask, and please do become more vocal about it. I think we are, the NHM, we recognise this is Anthropocene. We are in a period of increased and quite catastrophic failure of our environment that is brought about by us. So any deregulation, any move away from ensuring that our very denuded habitat in the UK, we're very, very denuded, is going to be detrimental. And to argue that it's going to be good for the economy and it's going to be good for agriculture is ridiculously stupid, because it can't benefit agriculture if we don't have the pollinators, decomposers, everything to sustain it. And it won't benefit our economy if we're having to introduce, import, and use so many different chemicals, food from other countries, etc. Very short. So yes, we do have to get vocal. Annoyingly, our waterways were some of the best. We were seeing a reverse in trends because of really good legislation that was beginning to actually make a real impact. So this is just a little bit, but that's my rant. Not allowed to go any further.
Andy, what I'll say as well is get involved in UK Use of Nature if you're not already part of our network, because I think Talia's probably already said it in the chat, but we're going to be doing a lot of campaigning, and we're going to get quite vocal about this because we can, because we're a political organisation. So David, I think he's going back to the hoverflies. He's asking, where are these hoverflies coming from? Are they suffering from climate change, and are they moving because of local stress?
So no, they're not moving for local stress. This is what they've done for a long, long time. What's that? Are they suffering from climate change? They probably will be, but because they are polyphagous, they're not restricted to just one or two plants. They can go to many plants. They are able to cope better. They fly really high. They can see a long way. Like I'm not sure. I could be lying, but I'm not doing it on purpose. But I'm sure there was something, because they fly from Iran to Cyprus, just being able to see those distances, to focus in on the island, because they always pit stop on the island. They can see like a kilometre away. So they're able to see these incredibly dispersed habitats to be able to get in there. We are noticing climate change, though, is having a really, and this was some work that came out of museum collections again. Butterflies, their wings have got smaller. Now, where it'll be interesting to start looking at all these migratory species and see whether this is the case. This is going to have, obviously, if it does, it's a negative impact. But also think about pesticides and all of that, and on floral resources. So the nutritional value of our plants is decreasing. So this will have a knock-on effect on all migratory, all species, full stop.
It's also interlinked, isn't it? It's never just one little problem.
And that's the thing. I mean, everyone is focused on one or two things, and it's like, hold on, you just can't. But I guess it's very overwhelming when you suddenly go, oh. And luckily in my building, we've got some dark spots that I can just go and sit when I'm like overwhelmed by it all.
You all need that.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody, I hope I haven't missed any other questions, but does anyone have anything else they would like to ask Erica? And I would absolutely love to, I have so many more questions I would like to ask you, but I don't want to monopolize this. So if nobody says anything, we might wrap up there then. What's your favorite insect? Great question.
Yeah.
I thought you'd have one ready for us.
No, because like, you know, when
Is it like asking between your favorite children?
Yeah, but I know I'm my mum's favorite, so that's, I mean, you do kind of know. So I got asked this at the weekend as well. So I'd probably go for one of those bee flies, just because they are adorable, but also they're really quite naughty. Again, I want people actually to go away and think about words, because words is quite important. When we talk about making our gardens messy, and what does that mean? And we talk about gruesome things and ugly things. And I know I do it, but I shouldn't do as much. But what I love about these bee flies is their larvae are parasitoids. Okay. But the mothers have a bum bag, and she will hoover up sand into her bum bag. And as she lays the eggs midair, they pass through this sandbag, and so they get coated. And they then get hurled around the garden, so it's the worst example of maternal care ever, but it's brilliant. And then the larvae, when they hatch, they will crawl into the nests of solitary bees and consume them. Now, what is great is that larvae will go through two stages. So one is like a toddler stage, so it goes bonkers and it just runs really fast, you can't control it, till it hits like the teenager stage, where all it wants to do is just sit and eat. So they go through this amazing life cycle. Everyone says, oh, what about the poor bees? Well, actually, a healthy population of bee flies indicates a really healthy population of bees. So it's all fine.
Amazing. Oh, they're so cool. They're so cool. I always thought they were very cute. And then when I found out they were parasitic, I was like, oh no, I'm not sure how I feel anymore, but that kind of makes them cooler.
It does.
Yeah. Okay, Michelle would like to know, have you ever discovered a new species, more specifically in the collections at the Natural History Museum?
Yes, loads of new species I'm trying to write up at the moment. In the collections, personally, I haven't yet, but everybody else is. We are now, because we're not just looking at morphology, we're not just looking at shape, we're looking at molecular. That's when it all gets funky. But then you have to ask yourself, what actually is a species? Now, our definitions of species are based on vertebrates, okay? And there's 26 working biological definitions. But with invertebrates, most of the time, we've caught them when they're dead, so we have no real clue. And let's think about the DNA of those and how closely interact and whatever. So, I don't know, it's throwing open loads of things. And when does one species stop and another species start? And things like that. It's all quite fun. But yes, it's really good for us in some ways, molecular work, because we have a lot of cryptic species, a lot of sneaky species that they all look alike, but we know that some are different. And this is quite important for vectors such as mosquitoes. So we are going back through our collections and actually hoiking out things. I'm doing a project with a lady and we're washing hoverflies. Yep, I do a lot of washing in my job. And we're looking at the surface chemicals because we're trying to elucidate whether there's actually a different species. I'm sorry, there's a spider just crawled up and it's just totally took my attention. Whether we thought there was just one or two species of this hoverfly in the UK, but there might be a sneaky third one. So we've been going around washing them to find out if this is actually the case.
Wow, science, amazing. Okay, so we've got time for one more question. And David says, pet flea and tick chemicals, are there any friendly alternatives, applications or practices?
So I did a panel debate with Dave Goulson the week, and he's like the king of the apocalypse and understanding insects. And actually he had a valid point, and I'd forgotten about my own experience. So I work with fleas as well as flies. And my vet said to me, my little monster down there, she's like, oh, because he keeps getting scammed. She's going, oh, you need to put flea stuff on him. He's got fleas. And I said, he hasn't. And they're like, he has, I'm a vet. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm an entomologist and I've been all over his body and he hasn't got fleas. And she was like, oh, and that's the problem, is most of the time, don't use it. Don't do your monthly put on your flea stuff. Don't do that at all. Just wait till if you're absolutely sure there is a flea infestation. So just think about the number of dogs and the number of cats in the UK and how much every month this is going on. And he worked out that the level of insecticides within just one dose is enough to kill 60,000 bees. It's a phenomenal amount. Okay, and we're just willy-nilly, and I don't think it's fair to blame us necessarily or the vets themselves. Again, getting this as an example of Big Pharma saying it has to be done this. We do not have to be prescriptive about this. We can be reactive.
That is, wow.
Yeah, I know it's Michelle just said it's concerning. Yes, yeah. I think when you start looking into it and you realize, oh my God, what have we been doing?
Yeah,
a lot of the like advocate and things like that, it's got chemicals that we've banned in agro ecosystems, full of neonicotinoids in them. You know, we've been causing a huge fuss about neonicotinoids, and yet all of us have been really quite bad without knowing it.
Yeah, goodness. Okay, this has given us all, well, it's definitely given me a lot to go away and think about. Wow. Okay. So we are nearly at time now. So I think we're going to wrap up there. I just want to say, Erica, thank you so much. That was an incredible talk. And yeah, like I said, I've got a lot to go away and think about. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for all of your questions. Please come along to our other sessions this week. We've got a whole load of other great things going on. Tomorrow, we've got an introduction to policy making in the UK, which is very timely, tells you how these policies are made, how can you get involved, because it's not just for politicians, it's for us as well. We've also got another one tomorrow evening after that on nature writing. So lots of very exciting and interesting things coming up. And I think Talia put a link to that in the chat. So please do sign up. Yeah, once again, thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it all. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers then, everybody. Bye-bye.